Greetings from Brother Stephen. I'm a disciple and witness of Jesus Christ. To all the inhabitants of the earth, I present to you as a witness this gospel of the kingdom. In this lesson today, titled Cherubim East of Eden, we're going to be going over Genesis chapter 3, verses 24. We're going to read this first in the King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769, which is a false translation of the Bible. It reads, So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So, two things we're going to focus on in this lesson. One is this word cherubims, and talk a little bit about the tree of life. I use the Blue Letter Bible when I study. So if you go on that Google Blue Letter Bible and open up that website, if you do a word search on cherubims, you will see that it occurred 65 times in the King James Version Bible. And again, this is Genesis chapter 3, verses 24. As you can see, this Blue Letter Bible translate the word cherubims from the Hebrew reference number 3742. If you click on that 3742, this will pop up on your next screen. This is the Hebrew word cherubims is translated from, and you pronounce this in Hebrew, keruv. Now, again, I'm telling you this, and I don't mean it to be confusing. It's just to teach you about this word cherubim in the Bible. If you search the word cherubims, as you can see, it occurs 65 times. But when you look at the Hebrew reference number 3742 and how many times this word appears in the King James Version Bible, it appears 91 times. So basically what that means is that this word keruv is not only translated as cherubim, but there's other words keruv is translated as in the Hebrew Bible, and we're going to go over those in this lesson. So now, again, if you take this 91 times keruv is actually mentioned in the Hebrew Bible and subtract it from this 65 times it is translated as cherubims, it's 26 other occurrences of this word keruv in the Hebrew Bible. Now, to explain this to you, where the other 26 occurrences is coming from, if you was to go to Exodus chapter 25, verse 19, it says, "And make one cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end, even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the two ends thereof." So the first thing I would do is show you a picture of kind of what they're talking about. This is a image of Solomon's temple, and in the holies of holies you had the Ark of the Covenant, which had two small cherubs, and then over the ark you had two large cherubims. Now this is the temple of Solomon, but when the children of Israel was in the wilderness, they had a temple too, but it was made of tent, but they still had of holy of holies. Now, and as you can see, the word cherub and cherubims come from this Hebrew reference number 3742. And so you have to ask yourself, why do they use cherub sometimes and cherubims at other times? Well, I'm going to explain that to you while I'm here. They use cherub when it's in reference to small cherub, and they use cherubims when it is in reference to giant cherubs or keruvs. So this next image I pretty much have for you here is a somewhat more of an accurate depiction of what cherubs look like. Cherubs, and we're going to go over the description of cherubs in this lesson. Cherubs don't really look like none of the images that when you look up a cherub, none of these images actually look like an actual cherub. And we're going to kind of go over that through this lesson. But again, this is kind of represent the two large um, cherubims, and this represents those two small cherubims that Ezekiel 25 and 19 is referring to. So, and make one cherub on the end and the other cherub on the other end. That's referring to these two cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant. Even on the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the two ends thereof. So, next thing I have here, again, is that Hebrew reference number 3742. And again, this is the Hebrew word keruv that cherub and cherubims is translated from. The first thing I want to do is explain why they add an IMS on the end of cherub. Now, to explain why they just add this IMS is because the word Eem is represented by these two letters in Hebrew, and you read from right to left. So this is the Eem, that I am at the end of their word. And the reason they add this on the end of cherub, so you can recognize it is a giant. The word Eem in scriptures on the end of a word is associated with that person or entity or thing being a giant. And so if you go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 13, when it's talking about, and the Mazraim, these are giants, and the Lunamim and the Anamim, and so on and so on. The I am at the end of a word just kind of represents as a giant. So they just kind of add this in there themselves to so you kind of identify a small cherub from a large cherubim or keruv. When you go to Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 11, it says, which also were accounted giants as the Anakim. So that means these Anakims are giants, but the Moabites called them Eames. So the Moabites summed up all the giants that end in Eam and just called them Eames. And even as you can see, this is that word Eames in Hebrew. And as you can see, it ends with that Eam. It represents giant on the end of the word. So in all honesty, cherubim is a false translation. They just add it in there. It should just be keruv or kerub. So now we're back to that kerub word or cherub. And it says this occurs 30 times in the King James Version Bible. So basically all I did, remember it occurs 91 times throughout the whole Bible. We just subtracted the 65 times it appears as cherubim, and then so we have 26 more times that the word keruv appears in the Hebrew Bible, and now we have to subtract the 30 times that cherub appear. So actually that leaves us at a -4. Now when you're seeing this, you might be confused, but I'm going to explain this to you also. When you look up the Strong's number H3743 instead of H3742, I'm going to scroll back up so you can see that. This is H3742. This is keruv. And then this is H3743. But this is also keruv. And this occurs 2 times in the King James Version Bible. But this is in reference to a place in Babylon versus a actual cherub. This is a location or place. So now go back to this little mathematical equation. We got our 91 minus 65 equals 26 minus 30 is a -4, and then we are subtracting 2, which give us -2. In other words, 2 more times where this word appears somewhere in the King James Version Bible. Now, the next time this word appears in the King James Version Bible, if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 11. As you can see, it says, and the wings of the cherubims were 20 cubits long, and the wings of the one cherub was 5. As you can see, the reason this word cherub is italic. This is normal. This is italic. And if you notice how this word cherubim have the Hebrew reference number and this word have a Hebrew reference number, this word was added in. It is not there in the Hebrew manuscripts, and this is why a Hebrew reference number don't follow this word. They just kind of added it to the sentence, so when you reading it, you understand what it's talking about. So now there's one other time in the Bible where this word appears, and that's in the New Testament, which is Hebrew chapter 9, verses 5, when it says, and over the cherub of glory shadowing the mercy seat, of which we can not now speak particularly. That is a Greek word, and it comes from the Greek reference number 5502. And the cool thing is about this is that we have a Greek translation for the Hebrew word cherub. And as you can see in Hebrew, this is kind of where they get that word cherub from. So you can pronounce it as cherub, or the more correct pronunciation is really cherub. And in the Hebrew, it's cheruv. And in the Greek, it's cherub. And as you can see, its etymology is from the Hebrew origin of, again, the actual living cherub. So now we get back to Genesis chapter 3, verses 24. Get into my translation of this particular verse. It will say, so he drove out Adam, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden a cherub with a flaming sword. In the King James Version Bible, it said, and a flaming sword. This is with a flaming sword, which turned every way to protect the way of the tree of life. In other words, this was a fire-breathing creature sent down from heaven to protect the tree of life. And now we're going to go over a few scriptures so you can have an idea of what some of these cherubs look like and where they're from. We're going to start this off in Ezekiel chapter 10. We're going to read verses 12, then jump to verses 20 through 22. And again, that's for the 10th chapter of Ezekiel. Verse 12 says, and their whole body, and their backs, and their hands, and their wings, and their wheels were full of ocelus around about. Now, the King James Version Bible used the word full of eyes around about. The reason I take eyes out and use ocelus is because ocelus, when you look it up in a dictionary, is another term for simple eye or an eye spot. And the reason I put ocelus instead of eye is because when most people read this, they think it's talking about actual eyes like a human being has, and it is not. It is actually talking about like the eye spots on a bird. These are called ocelus. These things have feathers and eye spots. And as we can continue to go through this, you will see that these cherubs are nothing but giant birds. When you go to, we have verse 20 now, it says, this is the living creature that I saw under Elohiym of Israel by the river of Kabar. Some people say Chabar or Kabar. I think Hebrew is pronounced Kabar. And I knew that they were cherubs. Everyone had 4 faces apiece. So again, we know that the living creatures is associating with cherubs, and the living creatures by the river of Kabar. These are cherubs. It says everyone had 4 faces apiece, and everyone 4 wings. And we'll get back to these 4 faces, and everyone, again, 4 wings. And the likeness of the hands of a man were under his wings. So basically all I'm doing is showing you a picture to try to help you understand what they're talking about as they're describing these cherubs. When they say the likeness of a man's hand under his wings, if you just look at the wings of a bat, As you can see, they have the likeness of a man's hand. They have 4 fingers and even a little thumb sticking out there. So again, if you notice, all the descriptions of these cherubs are associated with like birds. When you go to verse 22, and this again is in Ezekiel 10, it says, "In the likeness of their faces was the same faces." And we'll go over those faces later. It says, "Which I saw by the river of Kabar, their appearances and themselves, they went everyone straight forward." Now from here, we're jumping back to Ezekiel chapter 1. And probably going to read, let's see what we have here. Read through verse 11, because they give a more, the book of Ezekiel gives you a more detailed description beginning at the first chapter. But they do not call them cherubs at first. They just describe them. Again, they describe them as living creatures and by the river of Kabar, but it does not mention cherubs. So I went to Ezekiel 10 first, so you understand that these living creatures by Kabar are the cherub. So now we at Ezekiel 1. It says, "Now it came to pass in the 30th year of the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Kabar, that the heavens were open, and I saw a vision of Elohiym in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim captivity. The word of Jehovah came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Bazai, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river Kabar." And actually, the land of the Chaldeans is where Abraham was from. But keep reading. "And the hand of Jehovah was there upon him. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire, also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures." Again, these are those cherubs. "And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man." Now, same thing. The reason they say they have the likeness of a man, because just as you can see, this bird is kind of stretched up and out. You have feet. You kind of have like a torso. You have chest, and then you have arms. So if you have to remember, cherubs are huge birds. So if you kind of picture this the size of a man, you kind of see where you say the likeness of a man, and then it's also referring to the hands that is underneath the wings. Verse 6 says, "And everyone had 4 faces." Now, when they say they had 4 faces, this literally means they had a face on each side of their head. So they had 4 faces on one head. We can't really imagine this, and people try to do the best they can, but it is what it is. They had 4 faces on one head. And it says, "And everyone had 4 wings." So here I just kind of added those extra wings, and so you know that each 4 wings had the hands of a man in the corner of the rings. It says, "And their legs were straight legs, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot." Kind of very similar to these, except for they was probably even bigger than these. If you're wondering what these are right here, these are the legs of an is it an ostrich? I think the legs of an ostrich, a huge bird. These are just the legs of a huge bird. It says, "And they sparkled like the color of polished brass." So you take legs that look like this and then just make them this color. "And they had their hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides." And again, we just talked about that. "And the 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another, and they turned not when they went. They went everyone straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, the 4 had the faces of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and the 4 had a face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 also had the face of an eagle. So I didn't try to put these 4 faces all on one head. You just can't do that. But here I just have an image so you can understand the 4 faces that they kind of have. And the main thing you can kind of recognize here is just muzzle length. You have a beak, you have a long muzzle of a calf, you have a short muzzle of a lion, then you have one part of the face that's just completely deprived. There is no muzzle. Verse 11 says, thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one was joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. Now from here we just jump into Revelation chapter 4 verses 6 to 8, because they also give a description of these cherubs. And it says, and before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and in the midst of the throne and around about the throne were 4 beasts full of ocellae. So these are those cherubs. They are from heaven, and they are pretty much sits over God's throne. And this is why God had them design the holies of holies the way he did, because it represented God's throne in heaven. In heaven, these cherubs sits over God's throne. And these cherubs are not from earth. They are from the planet that God is from. It says, and the 4 beasts were like a lion, and the second beast was like a calf, and the third beast had a face of a man, and the 4th beast was like a flying eagle. The difference, all of these have single faces. They don't have 4 faces like in Ezekiel. These have single faces. And the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings. And again, instead of 4 like in Ezekiel's vision about him. And they were full of ocellae within. So again, when you picture these things, I know it's kind of hard to imagine, but when you think of these polished brass legs, and even the ocellae covered in ocellae feathers, these are some beautiful creatures. We just can't imagine them because it's not something we see every day, but these would be some beautiful creatures. Now from here, we're jumping back to Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 13 through 19, because they also give a description of cherubs. Verse 13 says, you have been in Eden, the garden of Elohiym. Every precious stone was your skin. In the King James Version Bible, it says color, but it's using these precious stones to describe the color of this cherub. It says the sardius, the tapazoid, and the diamond, and the beryl, and the onyx, and the jasper, sapphire, emerald, and of carbuncle and gold. So basically, these are all the skin colors of this cherub. And basically what it is describing is what we call today chameleon. And as you can see, this chameleon has all the colors of these stones. So again, beautiful species. It says, the workmanship of thy tabarines and of your panpipes were prepared in you the day you were created. So again, panpipes is referring to the vocal organs of the bird. So not only are these things, again, beautiful, hands in the corner of their wings like a bat, ocellae like a bird, they have the vocal organs of a bird, because these are just giant birds. And then when you get to verse 14, it lets you know, and you are the anointed cherub that cover. So one of the cherubs that covered the throne in heaven was this really beautiful cherub with chameleon skin. And I have set you so. You was upon the holy mountain of Elohiym, that is from on another planet, and you have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You was perfect in your way from the day that you was created, till iniquity was found in you. So one of these cherubs, these guardian birds, sinned. It says, by the multitude of your merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence. And again, the multitude of his merchandise is just like a parable for describing how beautiful his skin, these stones that represent his beautiful skin, is the multitude of his merchandise. They have filled thee in the midst of you with violence. They puffed him up, and you have sinned. Therefore I will cast you as profane out of the mountain of Elohiym, and I will destroy you, O covering Cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. So one of these cherubs sinned in heaven because of their beauty. It was puffed up, and Elohim saying he's going to cast him from off that planet where the mountain of Elohim is, and he's going to destroy that covering Cherub. Verse 17 says, thine heart was lifted up because of your beauty. We discussed that already. You have corrupted your wisdom. In other words, these things are intelligent. They are not dumb. They are not like the animals we have here on earth. They are they are more advanced. It says, by reason of your brightness, I will cast you to the ground. And this ground is referring to the earth. So this Cherub is being cast out of the heavens, or the planet that God is from, and being cast to the earth. And just to confirm that, when you go to 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4, it says, for if God spared not the angels, so these cherubs are also called angels. Anything could be an angel. An angel just means a messenger. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus, and Tartarus again is just in the middle of the earth's, it's the earth's core, and we go over this in that lesson, the cast out of heaven, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. So these cherubims and his angels was cast out into the earth, and the angels of this particular Cherub, in other words, this Cherub is like the head of these angels. He's like he has rank over these other giant birds or cherubs that is in the heavens. So the Cherub is cast to the ground. All of his angels that's underneath him, underneath his rank, they're cast into Tartarus, which is the earth's core. And this is confirm this when you go to Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. It says, and there was a war in heaven. Michael, which is a member of Elohim, they are not dragon of birds. Michael is a man. They look just like people, except for they have eternal life. They're part of the body of Christ. They're Elohim. And his angels fought against the dragon. So here they're referring to these cherubs in the book of Revelations as dragons. So a cherub is nothing but a dragon or a huge bird. And the dragon fought and his angels. And these are those angels that God spared not, that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus. Now I have a picture here again, just kind of trying to demonstrate like a person on that planet fighting against these dragons. And as you can see, they're just the appearance of a giant bird. You have the hands in the corner of their wings, kind of like a bat, and so on. These are just giant birds from another planet. Verse 8 says, and they prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And that great dragon was cast out. Just like we was reading in Ezekiel, when he's saying, I will cast you out to the ground, because you have corrupted your wisdom, and you have sinned. So they was cast out, and then it says that old serpent. So this is that serpent in the book of Genesis that deceives the woman to eating from the forbidden fruit. He, again, a dragon. And the reason he sinned is because he deceived the woman into eating the fruit. That was his sin. And when it says you have corrupted your wisdom, when you go back to Genesis, it says, and the serpent was more cunning or subtle than any of the beasts. He corrupted his wisdom. He used it to deceive. And again, and that great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. called Diablos, Satan, or Satan is the Hebrew word for enemy, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out unto the earth, and again he was cast to the ground, and his angels was cast out with him. But his angels was cast into Tartarus, delivered into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. And they are released in the last three trumps of the seven trumps they released in those last three trumps to plague the earth. When you go to Genesis chapter 3 verses 24, so again it says, so he drove out Adam, and he placed at the east of Eden a cherub with a flaming sword, which turned every way to protect the way of the tree of life. So just like they protect God's throne, God sent one of those cherubs to protect the tree of life. When you go to Revelation chapter 2 verse 7, it mentions the tree of life. It said, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit say unto the churches. To him that overcome will I give to eat of the tree of life. So that tree of life that the cherub was sent down to protect, so people could not eat and live forever. He's saying, he that overcomes will I give to eat the tree of life. Now you said, most people say, overcome what? He who overcomes the old serpent called Diablos, Satan, which deceives the whole world. You have to overcome deception, overcome sin. Then you'll be able to eat of that tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Now, the book of Revelations is in a new heaven. It's kind of taking place in a new heaven and a new earth. And that midst of the paradise of God is the exact same location that the Garden of Eden is. It is renewed, so now it is called the paradise instead of the Garden of God. When you go to Revelation chapter 22, we're going to read verses 1, 2, and 14. It says, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and out of the Lamb. This clear water they sing is most likely the water in the New Testament that is called the pool of Shalom. If you can recall, when Christ healed a blind man, he put mud on his eyes immediately after he left the temple, and he told him to go wash his face in the pool of Shalom. And so this tree of life and the throne of God, again, rebuilt in the last days, is going to be in that exact location. This is not on the Temple Mount, but in the city of David by that pool of Shalom. It says, in the midst of the street of it, and on either side, the river was the river. I'm sorry, let me read that again. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruits every month. And the leaves of the tree, and leaves represents herbs, those dark green that God gave man for the service of man to heal man. And then here it says these leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And then verse 14, and we're going to end this lesson with this verse. Blessed are they that do his commandments, not being deceived, not falling subject to this fallen cherub, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Again, blessed are they that keep his commandments. And with that being said, this concludes this gospel.